Hi and welcome very much to this latest 10x leadership video. I haven't posted for a couple of weeks, so I just had some other things I had to deal with. I'm pleased to be back though, and I'm going to be talking today about a video that is the last in the Modern Leadership series. And although it's the last one, it's probably one of the most important. And it's about why emotionally intelligent leaders win in business and in life. For those who've not been to the channel before and not seen any of these videos, they are long form videos, deliberately so. There's a load of information I want to try and convey, and you're just not going to get that in a 30-second or 1 minute clip. So if that's what you're after, this probably isn't for you. For everyone else, thank you very much for sticking around. And let's get into it. Again, if you've been here before, I'll put up on the screen where you want to jump to so you can miss this intro. But basically this is part of the Modern Leadership series that started back in episode 35, and it covered off three main areas: so adaptability, leveraging technology, and inclusivity. And all of that was about how do we navigate and negotiate and thrive, I suppose, in the ever-changing world that we find ourselves in, that is, modern leadership. And we covered off in videos 31, 36 and 37, adaptability. I covered off in episodes 38, 39, 40, 41 and 42, technology, and how to leverage technology for benefit. And then this last section has been about inclusivity, and that covered off 5 things: empowerment and decentralization, collaborative leadership, cultural intelligence and inclusivity, ethical leadership and responsibility, and focus on emotional intelligence. And the first 2 were covered off in episode 43, so if you haven't already seen that, go and have a look. And the 3rd and 4th were covered off in episode 44. And today what we're going to do is the last in the series, which is all about, I suppose, the difference between good and great leaders. And for me, if you stop and think about it, the difference is really how they make people feel. And the way that they do that is through high levels of emotional intelligence. And studies have shown that 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence. So if you want to be a great leader, you need to really be working on your emotional intelligence. Now, as you can see from that stat, it doesn't mean that if you're not good at emotional intelligence, you can't be a great leader. It's just that overwhelmingly, those who are great leaders have really high levels of emotional intelligence. And if you stop and think about, some of the best leaders you've ever worked with or ever worked for, was it their knowledge and experience that made a difference? Or was it how they made you feel and how they handled people and got the best out of people? And for me, and I think for lots of people, the answer is obviously the latter, which is it's about how they make people feel, how they handle people, how they get the best out of them. So, this video, as you saw from the title, is about how people with high levels of emotional intelligence win in business and in life. What I'm going to do is just talk you through what it is, why it matters, and crucially, I suppose, what you can do about it if you don't think you have high levels of emotional intelligence already. So let's have a look. So what is emotional intelligence? Really, in simple terms, it's the ability to recognise, to understand, to manage your own emotions, but also recognise and influence in the emotions of others. So I think I said in one of the very first videos on this channel, it's about that connection that you make with others. And we do that, and we can achieve emotional intelligence, or at least those connections, through sort of 5 or 6 different components. So I'm just going to go through those now. So the first is about self-awareness. And again, we've covered off some of this in previous videos. But it's about recognising how emotions impact your thoughts and your actions and your decision making. And an example of that is a leader who knows they get defensive under criticism can take steps to, I suppose, respond and react constructively rather than just reacting impulsively. Because if you react impulsively, you're probably going to be doing the wrong thing. You're probably going to be saying the wrong thing. You're probably going to be regretting doing that. So, one of the first components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. The second one, though, is once you recognise how you react and how you do things, it's doing something about that. So it's self-regulating. It's managing your emotions effectively. It's responding instead of just reacting. And a good example might be, if you're in a tense negotiation, a really good leader will remain composed and don't let the frustration derail the conversation. Whereas somebody who's not got control of their emotions is just going to kick off, aren't they, and say things that isn't going to be helpful, or get themselves into a position where the other person that's trying to get a better outcome is going to find it easier to do that, because they're going to wind you up and get you to say and do things that you don't want to do. So self-awareness and self-regulation are key. The other bit is about about motivation, and it's using emotions as a driving force for your motivation, and inspiring others as well. So a leader who remains positive despite I suppose immense pressure, or being in a really difficult situation, or in fact situation makes it sound like it's a one-off. It might be that they're working in a really difficult environment. It might be you might have a load of change activity to deliver, and everyone's getting really tired of it and reacting badly. How do you stay motivated? It's about understanding what motivates you and keeping yourself and your team motivated. It's also about empathy. So a lot of the first 3 are about yourself, certainly the first 2 are. The third one is about yourself and others. This one really is about others. How do you understand the emotions and the perspectives and the challenges of others? And if you understand that, you understand what makes others tick as well as what makes yourself tick, you've got much more chance of being able to use that positively. So, great leaders, again, will notice when an employee appears to be disengaged, and they'll take time to check in with those people, or adjust the approach they're taking to try and help them feel valued and try and get a more positive outcome to a situation. So again, a really strong, a great leader, an emotionally intelligent leader, whilst they're in a meeting, whilst they're saying things, they will be taking in information, they will be judging the mood of the room based on what they've said, and will be tweaking and adjusting. Now it might be that you still have to deliver the same message, but you might just do that differently depending on how you perceive that landing with the individuals, your team, and it might just be you still say the same, but actually what you do is you also recognise and you I suppose vocalise that you can see that hasn't landed well. So you don't ignore it, you call it out and you do something about it. And the final sort of component of emotional intelligence is about social skills. It's about navigating relationships, building trust, and managing conflicts effectively. And one of the best ways of doing that is that great leaders will sort of mediate disputes. They will recognise where there are problems between individuals, between parties, between groups, between teams, and they will try and find a solution where everyone feels like they're winning. And sometimes that's not possible, but that's the ideal outcome, where everyone feels like they've got something out of that situation and that interaction. So why does it matter? I mean, I've touched on some of these already, but leaders with high EQ, emotional intelligence, drive stronger team performance, better decision making, and improved workplace culture. So better decision making, if you're calmer, you understand what frustrates you, what makes you tick, and you've got some sort of regulation, some sort of control over that, you're going to make much better, much more rational decisions. Decisions that have been thought out rather than just what's the first thing that comes to mind, rather than just blurting out, an emotional response to a situation. And I say that's going to make or help you make much more controlled, much more coherent, much more decisions that are much more likely to be sound and much more likely to endure, rather than saying what the first thing that comes to mind and then having to reverse it 10 minutes later because you've sort of processed it and worked out you were talking rubbish in the first place. And an example of that might be a leader that gets some negative feedback isn't going to take it personally. They're not going to react emotionally, and instead they're going to think about what are they being told, why are they being told that, and extract some value from that they can use for a similar situation in the future, and make a better decision in this particular example, but use that for a positive outcome in the future. The second bit is about stronger team morale and engagement. So it's about understanding team members' emotions and preventing disengagement. So again, if you can spot where it looks like people are disengaged and not motivated, you're much more likely to be able to turn that around. And one of the best ways of doing that is to listen and value input from employees. Doesn't matter what level they are, how long they've been in, what their background is, whether they're from they have a protected characteristic or not. It's about everyone feeling included and having a say in how things are done. And we've covered this in other videos in this series. But that's how you get to have a high performing team. And a high performing team is going to have strong engagement, they're going to be motivated, and they're going to have high levels of morale. The other bit is about resolving conflicts rather than letting them fester, rather than letting them grow actually. I see lots of leaders, even good ones at times, who let their emotions get away, carry them away, and instead of diffusing a situation, they just add fuel to the fire and help it escalate. Sometimes that's because they've got a principle, or I keep hearing people saying, well, I'm just making a point. Is that point adding value? Is it helping you and your team move forward? If it isn't, then don't say it. But if you've got a situation that is tense, diffuse it. I've drawn a sort of fire extinguisher there, because if you're giving oxygen to a fire, it's just going to keep growing. What you want to be doing is starving it of oxygen and finding a way to de-escalate the tension, and ideally again seek common ground, seek a win-win from the situation. The other reason it matters is because if you can improve the trust that people have in you and the influence that you have, you're going to have much more impact. And the next line there is about people follow leaders that they respect. You might get people following you because they're scared of you, but they're not going to do that for long. The best leaders have respect, not just because you have some sort of authority. And people are much more likely to follow you, and they're much more likely to be motivated and much more likely to deliver if you're doing these things. So a leader who connects with people, who connects with employees on a human level, earns loyalty and earns respect, and is much more likely to get the best out of people. So that's why it matters. As I said before, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's great, but I'm not very good at this. And isn't it just some sort of inherent ability? Well, like lots of things, there are people who are born with this, but it is a set of skills that you can develop. And what I want to do now is just talk you through a few ways that you can develop your emotional intelligence. Whether you haven't got any at all at the moment or whether you've already got emotional intelligence, but you just want to make it better. And I've seen, I have genuinely seen this for myself, where I've worked with people who have got very, very low levels of emotional intelligence, but have really made improvements. It might take, quite a number of years to get there, but consistency is the key, and keep moving forwards. So there are 5, this is about the sort of 5 core components that we talked about before, and how can you develop those skills. So I'm going to go through the same 5, but this time I'm going to talk about how you can improve your skills in those areas. So to develop your self-awareness, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. So the first one is reflection. So it is about taking time to analyse how you're doing and how you're doing things, and what your triggers are. And one of the best ways of doing that is to write that down. It's to journal how you're feeling in certain situations, how you think you've done during, it might be at the end of the day. Just spend 5-10 minutes analysing how you did that day, what situations you encountered, and how you reacted to them. And that will help you recognise how you react, what your triggers are, and it will help you to choose to respond differently to those situations in the future. But it does take a little bit of effort. And again, one of the best ways of doing it is journaling, because it gives you a history and it gives you a trend, or it helps you identify trends. In terms of self-regulation, the first and the best thing to do is just to pause. Don't react immediately to things. Just take a breath. And that sort of leads me to the second point. You can take a breath, but also if you know that you are going to go into a stressful situation. So for lots of people that's, doing public speaking, for example. But it might also be, you're going to go into a meeting where it's going to be difficult and you're already under stress. Well, you can do something called box breathing, where you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds, and then you hold it for 4 seconds, and you repeat that process 3 to 5 times. And I do yoga, and you do breathing techniques there, and it has a positive impact on how your body is reacting. And as you can see there at the bottom, Navy SEALs and loads of other people use this sort of technique to stay focused under extreme pressure. And whilst it feels like extreme pressure to you going and having a conversation or doing a public speaking or going to a stressful meeting, it's nothing like Navy SEALs or other military people are facing. So if it works for them, it can definitely work for you. The third is motivation. And one of the best ways of staying motivated is to align what you're doing to your values. And what I mean by that is your sort of deeper values, not just your, not just sort of flim-flam things, but really things that are a deep driver for you. And for, I think probably all of us, that is intrinsic, so sort of internal drivers. So things that really motivate you rather than extrinsic things. Things like external things like money, status, fear. They will motivate you for a while, but it's not the same as having deep-seated motivation. So things that are going to drive you, from your core, basically. And what I just want to talk about there is just a bit more information about that. So, we all have things that are, I suppose, dear to us and are core values. And if you can understand what they are and tap into those, it's going to keep you going in those difficult times. So, for me, one of the things that I'm really interested in is growth, both personal growth, but helping others to develop as well. So, when I'm spending hours on these videos, doing research, thinking about what topics I'm going to talk about, what's the best way of conveying all of that, it'd be really easy to go, this is difficult, I'm not going to bother. But actually, because one of my core values is about growth, it keeps me going. I use it as a sort of compass for saying, well, what's the right direction here? I could have stopped doing these videos after I've had that little break of a few weeks. But actually, it's really important to me that I keep growing and that I help others to grow. And hopefully these videos are doing that. So that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me motivated. So find what yours is as well. In terms of empathy and developing empathy, active listening is one of the best ways of doing that. And one of the best ways of demonstrating active listening, apart from obviously listening to what the person's saying and not listening just to respond, but listening to understand. It's about repeating or paraphrasing back to them what you think you've heard and asking clarifying questions. So again, it's about listening to understand, and questioning techniques and paraphrasing is a good way of, I was going to say forcing that to happen, but making sure that that's happening. And the other is noticing non-verbal cues that people are displaying. So again, if you notice that someone who's normally quite, motivated, quite is quite loud, or and is suddenly withdrawn and quiet, or not talking in meetings and not contributing, check in on them, ask them how they are, and offer support. And don't just ask them how they are and then when they say fine, just move on. If you know something's not right, say, no, I'm really asking, I'm genuinely asking how you are. And that is usually, the second time that you ask is usually, a cue that you really are interested. And it gives them permission to tell you what's wrong. The other bit is about developing social skills. And a lot of this is about giving feedback in a way that encourages growth rather than makes people feel defensive. And again, I've talked about this a few times in this video. It's about finding common ground that builds strong relationships. If you've got a reputation for helping everyone feel like they've got something out of a situation, that's going to stand you in really good stead. And in terms of social skills, sometimes I see people who, they talk about networking, and what they're really talking about is trying to make connections, and they're more interested in the number of people that they talk to rather than the quality of the connection that they make. And if you can make really good quality connections, that's going to pay dividends again. You're much more likely to be able to work with those people, or they're much more likely to call you or want to work with you in the future if you've made that human connection. I just want to pick up on a point I've raised there, which is about giving feedback. It's okay me saying that, isn't it? give feedback in a way that encourages growth, not defensiveness. But how do you do that? So I just want to cover off 6 ways that you can actually achieve that. So the first one is about psychologically safe. It's about, not just creating the environment, but showing that you're trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. So, the line I've put in there might be a useful line for you to use. You could be saying to somebody, I want to share something that can help you continue to grow. And it's about supporting you, not judging you. Now, I don't know about you, but if somebody said that to me, I still might be a bit nervous about what they're going to say, and they would still need to present that information in the right way. But if they started off with that, I'd be thinking, well, clearly they're trying to help me here. They're not trying to just be a pain. I'm more likely to listen. The second thing is about how you deliver that feedback. And I've covered the SBI model off in a previous video. So if you haven't already seen it, go off and watch that. In short, it's about explaining what the situation is, what the behaviour of the individual was, and what impact that had on you. And it's a sort of non-confrontational way of providing feedback. So as I say, if you've not already seen that, go and watch it. It's a good video. Number 3 is about being future focused. So it's not about labouring what they did. It's about helping. It's about acknowledging what they did, but also helping them think about the future. So, you could be saying, what do you think you might do differently next time? And you might offer suggestions. So it's not just about coaching and getting them to come up with the answer. But what you do want is you want them to own it. You want the monkey to be on their back, not on yours. Number 4, and this is a really good trick, is using I. So, if you said to somebody, you were really rude in that meeting, that's really confrontational. Instead, if you tried something like, the line, I felt the tone in the room shift when that thing happened, whatever that thing happens to be, and I was concerned about how it landed. You're sort of taking ownership, you're making it about your feelings that you're conveying to somebody else rather than just confronting them. So using I is a really good way of providing non-confrontational feedback. The 5th one is about the balance and not overloading what could be perceived as criticism. So instead you're sort of balancing off, and I've put a sentence there. So your insights were sharp and you managed the data really well. I think if you can work on giving others more space to speak, it will make your impact even greater. So you're acknowledging they did great things. You're not just calling out the thing that they didn't do well. What you're basically doing is calling it in. You're saying, look, you did a load of good things, and if you did this thing, that would make it even better and have even greater impact. And again, it's about you, but if somebody said that to me, I'm much more likely to take that positively than just somebody pointing out the problem. And the 6th point is choosing your moment to provide feedback. So, ideally do it in a private, calm environment where they can hear it and reflect on it. Don't do it in the heat of the moment when they're already tense and stressed, and don't embarrass them in front of other people. Choose your moment and it's much more likely to land. So in summary, emotional intelligence is about you understanding and managing your own emotions and being able to do the same with others. It's also about having strong self-awareness, strong regulation. It's about having strong motivation. It's about having empathy and social skills. And developing your emotional intelligence leads to better leadership, stronger teams and greater success, which is why I said at the start it's about people with high levels of emotional intelligence win in business and in life. So do you want to lead with impact? Do you want to be a great leader? If you do, start by mastering your emotions and understanding others. And if you can do that, the world is your, I've got to say your oyster, but let's say lobster. Much more amusing. Your world is your lobster. So, as I say, this is the last video in the Modern Leadership series, but actually it's one of the most important. This is a skill that you absolutely must master if you want to be a great leader, or at least the odds tell us that 90% of leaders great leaders have great emotional intelligence. Hopefully that's useful. Hopefully it's given you an understanding of what emotional intelligence is, why it's important, and I suppose critically what you can do about it and how you can develop it if you haven't got emotional intelligence at the moment, or your emotional intelligence isn't where you think it needs to be. Seek feedback. That's another thing you can be doing. Get lots and lots of feedback from others. A friend once told me feedback is a gift, and it absolutely is. But treat it as such. Don't treat it as criticism. Treat it as a way of being able to learn and grow. As ever, if you found this useful, please subscribe. It costs you nothing but really helps the channel. Share this video with others and let me know how you get on. Let me know how this works for you and what a difference it makes, and whether some of the techniques I've talked about really do make a difference for you. Equally, if you've got any questions about this video and the content, just stick me a comment and I will try and answer it and give you some top tips. It might also give me some clues as to what sorts of videos you want to see in the future. That's it for this week. Thank you very much. I've had my break. I'm going to crack on with some videos. I've got quite a few other ideas, and then I'm probably going to move into a sort of how do I series where I'll pick some scenarios and some situations, and I'll just talk you through how I would handle those, which hopefully will help you handle those same sorts of situations. So again, if you've got any ideas or got any problems and scenarios you want solving, drop me a comment. Tell me what it is that you want me to help you solve. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.